Hello and welcome to Aline's first digital summit. I'm Stephanie Darville, one of the co-founders of Aline.
Yes, and my name is Innocent Mugenga. I'm also one of the co-founders of Aline. And today we've created this event, which we call the Career Puzzle. So navigating job and gig opportunities. And Stephanie, what are you excited about with today's panel?
It's hard to say because the schedule is packed, but I think I'm most excited to see what people at home listening are learning from it, seeing your questions and seeing what value you get out of the event today.
Yes, so drop your questions in the comment section below.
And what are you most excited about, Innocent?
I would say I'm most excited about the mix, so the diversity and different perspectives we will have from all these experts we've invited. So I'm excited to learn myself. And to kick us off, you will actually give us a keynote. So the stage is yours.
Perfect. Let's do this. So if you are also wondering what is behind me, these are the names of the different panels that we have coming up. So just to get you excited, we have one I'm new here, one called Empowered, one full-time employee or freelancer, and the learning age. But to get us started and put us in the right mindset, I'm going to talk to you about how lifelong learning creates professional opportunities. So everybody here and everybody at home, I'd just like you to take a second, close your eyes, and imagine education. Now, that many people will interpret it in their own way, but I would bet a lot of money that most of you have an idea of some tables, sitting with some chairs, probably an adult at the front of the classroom, and a child sitting there. And that's one of the things. People still associate education with children and something we do when we're younger. But actually, it's a lifelong pursuit. And often what people are imagining when they think of education, it's actually schooling. So that's why I want to try and change your minds, make you think about education as a lifelong journey, and also looking at nowadays in society, we look less at conventional education. So that's generally fixed in a classroom, looking at validating the completion of the course. But actually now we see society moving into streamed learning and seeing people looking at the validation of the knowledge you have and the incremental bits that you pick up. So if you take away nothing from this talk today, I'd like you to remember three things. The first thing is 2.5 times happier. The next one is 87% of an opportunity. And then $6 trillion. Now I'm going to talk you through those three bits. So the aim of this speech today isn't to explain what lifelong learning is or why you should do it. We see that the desire to learn isn't an issue in society, but it's people looking for the right tools and behaviors and understanding how they can do it and also the impact that this can have. And specifically about the opportunities that you can have when you do participate in lifelong learning. So starting off as the individual, so everybody here, what is very good and nice news to hear is that there's been some studies done and actually participating in lifelong learning boosts your happiness. So there's a happiness index of lifelong learning called HIL from 2014, and they saw that people that participated in regular lifelong learning had 2.6 times improved self-esteem, 2.5 times improved personal development opportunities, 2.5 times less negative emotions, and 2.4 times higher sense of purpose in what they do. So it's not just to boost your professional opportunities, but as an individual also has a lot of benefits. Now, if we look at the opportunity from a company perspective, actually McKinsey has shown that 87% of companies either have a skills gap now or they will within 5 years. So some companies may stress and may worry about those figures, but actually as employees, we need to look at that as our opportunity. That means that 87% of companies are going to be looking for people with skills like critical thinking, analysis, problem solving, empathy. So that is what we can actually contribute into the job market. And it's also, we see the rhetoric shifting. So it's becoming less of an employer's market and more of an employee's market. That empowers us. That's one of the topics of today's panel, but it empowers us to really state what we need. And there's also been a statistic showing us that departments that participate in learning and development actually have 92% more innovation, as well as 66% of millennials have said that it is their company's duty to provide learning opportunities to keep them in the company. And I think if we went to younger generations, that figure would increase. So actually, companies need to be offering the platforms for learning, the platforms for continuous improvement, or they will lose their workforce. And that is what we can use to our advantage when we're looking for either gig or job opportunities. Now, I've spoken to you about the 2.5 times happier, the 87% of the skills gap, which presents an opportunity for us. And the third figure that I spoke about was 6 trillion. So World Economic Forum has shown that just by upskilling our workforce, it'll add $6 trillion to the global economy. So not only improving your own individual happiness as well as your company's performance, you're actually impacting society in a very positive way. Now, that's the impact that lifelong learning can have, but a lot of people will be asking, okay, how do I start? So the first thing to remember, it's not force-fed learning. Compliance and force-fed learning is gone. What we need to look at is dynamic, self-led, personalized learning in the flow of work and life. And I think a lot of people can feel a bit scared about how they'll fit the time in to be able to learn and work simultaneously. But the good news is that it's proven that doing 20-minute sessions of learning 7 days a week is much more impactful for your memory retention, for your learning, for your creativity, much more impactful than doing one 140-minute session. So it doesn't have to be you dedicate a whole day, just 20 minutes a day of reading, of listening, of learning. And that is also why we have decided our panels are going to be 20 minutes each. So it's the perfect snippet of learning that you can do. So if you take away, as I said, with the 3 figures, the 2.5 times happier, the 87% opportunity, because there's 87% of companies looking for people with skills like yours, and adding $6 trillion to society. There's a quote which is one of my favorites that's used predominantly in fighting sports, martial arts, called win or learn, but now we see it coming into the job market, into life. But I would actually flip the script and say, actually, to learn or lose. If you're not learning, then you will be losing, both from all aspects of life. So what I want to ask you today is, how are you learning today? What bits of learning are you getting from each of our panels? We have an amazing setup of guests coming up, so please let us know what you learned from it and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you very much, and now we're going to start with our first panel called I'm New Here, about creating professional opportunities as an immigrant. Hello and welcome to the first panel of the day. So this one is I'm New Here and how to create professional opportunities as an immigrant. Now I'm very happy to be joined by Shayna, Hira and Jill. And just to kick things off and to understand where you come from, what's your story in Sweden, be good if we could do very quick introductions of each other. So Shayna, kick us off.
Hi, so Shayna, and originally from Canada, been in Sweden for the last 10 years. How did I end up here? I am a love immigrant.
Nice. And Hira, what about you?
I'm originally from Pakistan and I moved here approximately 3 years ago to do my master's. Stayed here because I like the country.
Great.
My name's Jill. I'm originally from Scotland, and I have lived in Sweden now for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And like Shayna, I am a love immigrant as well.
Nice. And just to give the audience some context as well, I am from the UK, so I'm also bred in Sweden, and I came here 4 years ago for work initially. And like Hira, stayed it because I liked it, and that's it. But you are all linked in some way in that you are very passionate about creating opportunities and creating a platform for immigrants in Sweden and telling their stories. So what do you see the commonalities between networking in Sweden versus previous countries that you've lived in? And I know all of you have lived in other countries post your native country and before coming to Sweden. So Hira, do you see any similarities? And also, what countries have you lived in before, to give a bit more context?
I've hopped all over the place a bit. I've lived in the UK, the Netherlands and America for a while as well, along with Pakistan, of course. I would say there's a common thread there when it comes to people who perhaps don't grow up in a country trying to penetrate that job market, so to speak. There's a bit of resistance at first. Of course, you don't really necessarily know how to maneuver those unspoken social rules, for example, that you might not know you could be crossing. There's a lot of understanding that needs to happen regarding those. And then you're able to sort of break that barrier a bit when it comes to being able to speak to people in a new country and trying to crack that job market, so to speak.
I see lots of nodding from either side of you. Jill, do you share the same thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I haven't traveled as much as you know, but I mean, I have moved from Scotland down to London, and then I was in Canada, and then moved back, and I went to Sweden. I came to Sweden, but there is definitely this journey. There's this kind of immigrant journey, and it not just within the job market, but within the life market as well, that everyone goes through to different degrees. You know, it's kind of a sort of bell-shaped wave that goes on about, you know, coming to the new country, experiencing the excitement, going through that honeymoon phase, kind of going into this dip of slow realization that, oh my God, everything is totally different, and I have to suddenly reacclimatize my own identity to a certain extent when it comes to entering the job market, entering, you know, the social scene and so on. So it's I completely agree. There's a lot of learning that needs to take place when you kind of go into that experience.
And you came to Sweden 10 years ago now, Shayna, right? Did you find that you adopted a new identity of sorts when you came? And how does Shayna 10 years ago compare to Shayna in Sweden now?
I think, 10 years ago, so I came over pregnant with my second son and, did the whole mama ledig, mama fika, even that whole circle. And when it was time to get work, just realizing that there's a lot of other people that are just as talented. I think I'm talented, that also are trying to find jobs. And what you need to do, especially 10 years ago when the tech scene wasn't what it was today, and where, English wasn't as, common in the workplace, was you need to sort of do something different. So I always say to people, like, instead of saying I'm looking for, say I offer, show how you bring value to company X. And that was sort of my light bulb moment when I did that. Like, the game changed completely.
I really love that. Just changing the rhetoric can completely change how you approach opportunities. And I'm interested, so when you first made the jump over the water, whichever water that may be, what were you most fearful of in a professional sense, Jill, when you're moving to a new country and sort of establishing a new career as well?
I think it's exactly what Shayna just touched on there. It's like, is my value as my skills, my experience, what I have to offer, is it going to be valued? Will it be seen as something that is worth having within the context of the Swedish labor market, for example. So that was something that had bothered me, and still does to a certain extent, because I think there's no real getting away from the fact that, as despite the fact that we essentially have acclimatized to living here in Sweden, we speak Swedish, there's still this element of, I will always remain an immigrant here because I'm born abroad. So there's a kind of an element of, I have to prove that my value is there, that whatever it is. So I think there comes an element when you accept that this is something that just that in every country it's like in that way. Then you it does seem that opportunities grow, they appear more often, and so I think
if I can add, I don't know, I look about like sort of, if you think about a brand, like brand recognition. So if I take, for example, a Canadian brand, CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting System, and you have SVT, the Swedish, very similar, but most people won't know what the Canadian Broadcasting System is, right? But a lot of people in Sweden know. Obviously, everyone knows what SVT is. If you think of yourself as a brand, you need to sort of Swedify yourself, so people can recognize and see similarities, or else they're going to look at you and be like, "Who are you? What do you do?" Right? So how do you, how do you sort of rebrand yourself to make
exactly? And I think that's part of the learning journey that you go on as an immigrant, regardless of any element. It doesn't have to be about finding a job. It's about making friends. You have to go through this learning process, rebranding process of how do I turn me into something that's recognizable. It's not changing your identity. It's just I need to make myself identifiable.
Just change the switch as such. And I completely agree with everything you're saying. And one thing, I think there's a lot of people that will be watching that are maybe considering moving abroad, wherever that may be. But just a question, the journey that we're speaking about, does it get easier the more countries that you live in? Hira, did you find that the more countries you lived in, you found it easier to integrate and adapt?
I would say both yes and no, in the sense that you learn to trust yourself a little bit more, that even if it's very difficult at the start, you will be able to adapt. But every country has a different set of values, a different set of requirements, a different job market out there. So it does get easier, but also it doesn't, because it's a different hurdle each time, right? So that's I think how I think about it. And coming to Sweden in particular, there was a bit of an aspect of time urgency as well, because I moved here when I was studying, so you have a certain amount of time to look for a job after that, and then trying to crack that job market in that specific time while having sort of completed the list of requirements, that you Swedify yourself a little bit more, you try to get a degree, you try to learn the language as well. That's an interesting experience, and definitely a learning curve as well, like you touched upon.
And what was your approach, Shana, when it came to networking, coming to Sweden, or previously you've lived in Ireland and the UK as well? What's your approach, or what's your process when you first land in a country?
I think it's finding your interest groups and joining them. So like for me, if that was, I love public speaking, so I joined Toastmasters, or finding the TEDx community, or also the immigrant community, right? And sort of identifying those little pockets of the people that are, number one, experiencing what I am, but also interested in the things that I am. And that's definitely what's sort of been good help.
And if I could add on to that, because I went through the similar journey in the middle of a pandemic, so a lot of the in-person events were a bit out of the question. But what really worked, I think, was just reaching out to people on LinkedIn and asking them if you could have a chat to just pick their brain about the field they're working in. Try to learn from them if they have the time for that, and promise them a fika or a coffee afterwards once you're able to meet in person as well. So
Definitely. I think LinkedIn is a very powerful tool to bring people together. Maybe you want to mention your LinkedIn game, Shana, because I think that's been a great tool for your networking as an immigrant.
Absolutely, and everyone steal this with pride. So we played the game earlier today, and basically it's super simple. You meet someone new, And you have to guess how many connections you have in common on LinkedIn. Person who gets closest wins. Other person buys them a fika or a lunch, depending on where your price went, or nothing at all. But win, lose, or draw, you come up with a meeting. And then what's also really interesting is that when you do start to look at your mutual connections, you can be like, oh, how do you know so-and-so? And it changes that conversation, right? But again, you still come up with a meeting and you totally change that that first interaction. And even if you don't have anyone in common, which has happened, you still have a connection, right? You're still coming out and hopefully going for that lovely fika. Exactly. Right?
And I think it's a great game. What is your win-loss
Oh my gosh.
rate?
I can't comment because I don't know. But if there's anyone out there that wants to help me build an app, I'm game.
But I see a very common thread in terms of finding common interests. And personally, from my perspective as well, being an immigrant, I find the quicker you can get to common interests or common connections of people, the better it becomes, because it stops people just putting you in the immigrant box of you're not, where are you from? You're from this country has this associations. And actually you get to the next stage when you realize, I mean, all of us are much more than our nationalities. So when you actually get to the next stage of common interests, you can progress further into creating a better connection.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you think about also like a vouch, right? Like the same thing as if you get a job, you get a referral. If the more people you know can vouch for you and say great things about you, that also helps with building trust. And hence the reason why that game is also fun.
And just as a open question, what if you were to give a nugget of wisdom or some lessons learned that you've had, what would you give to anyone that is considering looking for more professional opportunities abroad? And I'll start with you, Jill.
I think I have to go with what we've already actually discussed, which is don't necessarily fall into the trap of looking just from a professional scope. Seek out your passions and your interests and follow those as an avenue to meet like-minded people. Because you said that's exactly, you touched on it, you know, you have to see yourself as all parts are whole, you know, it's not just a singular part that makes you the professional that you are. So yeah, I think that's definitely the piece of advice I would give.
I agree.
What about you, Hira?
I would say get comfortable stepping out of your comfort zone because there's going to be a lot of that as well. And I think viewing things more as a bit of a challenge from a positive perspective really helps, because you need to try to keep up that mindset as well when you're doing that and stepping out of your comfort zones. And just believing that even if things aren't necessarily working out on the surface with jobs, for example, in Sweden, still trying to confirm that belief in yourself somehow, having yourself a sense of identity wrapped up in yourself instead of necessarily in the rejections you might receive.
Absolutely.
So that was more than one little nugget. So
I think that was many nuggets of wisdom. I'm sure everyone's happy to hear them as well. What about you, Shayna?
I would say to wander the halls. And what I mean by that is the more you show up at different places, whether it's physical or digital, the more you become recognizable. And if you are someone that can post content or comment on things, and that this is the digital stuff, but also if you show up at events like this, you know, keep that consistency, because again, it's going to help you build your authentic brand and then hopefully lead to that opportunity of, I don't know, a job, a future love interest. Who knows? It can go anywhere, right? Or a fika.
Yeah, digital breadcrumbs definitely are very important.
Yeah.
Great. And just one last question. If you had to pick one of your favorite quirks from any of the countries that you've lived in, what would be your favorite quirk of that country that you had to learn? It's a big question, I know.
Favorite quirk?
I think for me, it has to be lördagsgodis.
For any non-Swedish speakers, it's very common in Sweden that on Saturday, everyone goes and gets a pick and mix or the individual sweets. And that's a Saturday ritual for sweets.
Yeah. Do you have a quirk?
You can go ahead.
Do you have an Irish or a Scottish quirk?
I have many quirks. And I have many quirks. But the Swedish one is, right. I love that quirk, but it's not a quirk. I guess it's a language thing, right? How people say yes or answer things. A Scottish quirk, don't have one. An Irish quirk. it's not even a quirk. It's the language, but like the fact that there's so many different accents and, you know, like, come here to me, what's the story? Like that's not even a quirk. That's just what I remember from Ireland. Yeah.
Just the language.
The language, but also like the friendliness around that language, and it means so much.
In Sweden, I would say I'm a very social person, and there is a bit of the Swedish joke around. You check to see if your neighbor is outside before you leave to make sure you don't run into your neighbor. That was, for me, accepting that, but also trying to challenge it a bit, and maybe actually running into my neighbors and saying hi and hoping not to freak them out too much. That was a quirk that I think I appreciated learning about.
Challenged, and you probably found a common interest.
Can I just add, I have a theory why that's happening, just so you know, because of all the underhanded black rental markets. Nobody owns their apartments. That's why they don't come out. Yes.
That's why. But great, thank you. I think I can add my own quirk specifically for Sweden. Fika, which is a coffee and a tea in the afternoon. The part where I laugh the most at Swedes is that everyone refuses to take the last section of fika.
Yes,
because it's a very equal society. So the final section will go from here to here to here to here, and they will carry on cutting it in half for as long as physically possible, just to make sure no one misses out. And I think that's my favorite quirk of them. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Now, coming up next is our second panel, which is the learning age. But first, we're going to take a quick break of a few minutes. Just stretch your legs and refill your coffee cups, and we'll be right back.
And welcome back to another panel. This panel is called The Learning Age, and we have three fantastic guests to explore this subject. We have Paulina, Sophie, and Lotta. We can start off with a brief introduction of yourself, and then we can dig into the questions. Starting from here.
Sure. So I'm super happy to be here. My name is Sophie Navseth, and I'm part of the core team at a AI and learning company called Sana Labs. When I'm not doing that, I'm also part of the Women in AI community and the ambassador here in Sweden, working for a more gender equal society in AI.
Brilliant work.
And I'm Paulina Modlikva. I'm an angel investor in Aline, actually.
Yes.
So I can now call myself an investor as well. But apart from that, I have a tech background, studied and did research at KTH and MIT Media Lab. And for the last 7 years or so, I've been running my own business as a consultant. I do a lot of building conferences. I love meeting people and encourage people to meet and exchange, experiences and knowledge. And I talk and I facilitate, and I'm involved in business development projects. And there's nothing that I don't do.
Yeah, multi-talented.
Exactly.
So I'm Lotta Saxe, and I'm super excited to be here and with you guys. I loved the Women in Tech, both this year and last year, but especially last year when we were there.
Yeah, which is one of the conferences that I work on.
Exactly. Yeah. So I work in recruitment and consultancies as well, within specifically communication and marketing and design and that kind of area. I also teach, so I'm an industry leader at Hyper Island and school here in Stockholm. I've been at Berg School of Communication as well for many years previously. So I'm a little bit of everything. I've been in the communication industry for 20-something years in some way all the time. So both on the client side and the agency side. And now I passed to recruitment, which is super fun.
All right. Yes. And this panel is called The Learning Age, tying into the information age and knowledge work. So I want to start off with a question where we can explore sort of what do we see when we speak about the future of work? What do we see as a future of work in this information age? And I'll pass this to you, Paulina, to start there.
Oh, we will see a much more sort of fast-paced, complex, but also more fun and diverse world where learning is everything. I mean, learning has always been important in changing and leveling up and all these things, but it will be even more important. And one of the reasons why I thought, why I wanted to invest in Aline, for example, we've had long discussions about this, is that we have to change our way. We have to learn so much more and so much faster. Another side of that is that we also have to reconsider the learning that we're already doing. So the books we read, the podcasts we listen to, the conferences that we attend, everything should be considered learning and not just official classes where you get a diploma or a master class or whatever it is. So, there are so many aspects to it, I'd say.
Oh, yes. It's a more dynamic future of sorts. And how do you see the individual in this future?
I think, just to add on to Paulina's point, I think with all of this, there are actually a lot of things that we have to unlearn as well, since the pace of learning is going to be so fast and we have to become really effective, or organizations have to become really effective with upskilling and reskilling. But in that, we also have to become quick at learning, but also quick at unlearning the old habits and ways of doing things.
And that's a learning in itself, learning to unlearn.
Yes, exactly. But I think for the individual, I think it's going to be, I hope it's going to be personalized so that it is really focused on the individual. Yes. And we're coming from this time when learning, or perhaps the more traditional learning that you just mentioned, sort of the classroom-based, has been the same since the industrial era. And I think,
quite ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's what we're here to change. I think both companies like Aline and Sana Labs and such.
I agree, and I think that from my point of view as a recruiter, it's super interesting to see how the focus for the individual kind of shifts from what are my kind of experiences, what have I done, what have I learned, and more towards potential, right? So it's more like, how fast can I learn? How adaptable am I? And if I encounter something that I don't already know, what's my attitude towards that? And we're looking for that very, very often. It's like, you want someone who's, they don't know something, they're just going to go learn it.
Yes.
They're not waiting for their boss to kind of give them a course that they're supposed to take in the evenings. They just learn it.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
The way they can.
I believe a lot in that, and it ties into being passionate about this, wanting to apply yourself as well.
Yeah.
But if we go back to the skills, sort of, you want to show your ability, but you also have to have specific skills and competencies. What do we think are relevant, the top skills, let's say, to learn today? I'll start with you.
I think it's like, so many people would say coding, and of course that's an important skill, but I think that the soft skills are even more important. And I think that just, if I had to rank skills, I think that self-leadership is the most important one, because that's kind of what lies at the base of everything, of learning and of being a part of a company, and being able to adapt to new situations. So that would be my kind of top priority, I think.
Yeah, I'd say people who can coexist with technology and robots, and because that's definitely going to be that's already, that reality is already here. So as a doctor, you have to be able to coexist with AI platforms, providing you with information, and then it's up to you to make a final decision, and also be sort of a human in this. And you're also in charge of the sort of relationship with the patient. So that's where the soft skills come in. Yes, but definitely still a lot of tech. Because again, you're coexisting with technology, so everything is tech.
So it's both collaboration with other humans and collaboration with technology as well.
Yeah, definitely. But I think also on that point, for the soft skills, it's around empathy. And as of today, we don't know that technology can learn empathy. Maybe it will one day, but I think so far that's definitely one of the things that we know computers can't learn today, and that's going to remain one of the most critical skills for humans. And then also being able to learn, and be quick at this.
Yeah. And I, during the pandemic, for example, I was thinking about sort of self-leadership, but also it's become so clear how important leadership is, and the, new forms of leadership, especially in this pandemic, where you have to change really quickly. You have to let go of control, the more control-oriented leadership, or chefskap, old school way of being a boss, I guess, doesn't work anymore. I just heard somebody mention that apparently women have been better leaders during the pandemic. I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen actual numbers, but I think it's related to the empathy.
Yeah, and I've actually read this about as well, regarding the most important skill that you can have as a leader.
Exactly, because again, it's not just about the work. It's very obvious that you have to understand what your employee is experiencing, sitting at home, anxiety, isolation, all these things. So it's very complex.
I think also, to add to what you were saying, it's we see very much that something that is so needed is, this kind of ability to coexist with tech, but also like just a general digital savviness or something, being, having an idea of how things work. Because that's kind of essential in any role.
For sure,
today.
for sure. And I think that's really around understanding, as you're saying, how to be able to use something.
Yeah.
And imagine if we look back and we taught everyone HTML when that came. Okay, what would the world look like today?
Yeah, but also like you can't ask of people, well, you need to know this specific like technology or this specific tool, because tomorrow there's going to be a new tool.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
programming
more,
language.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So it's more about a mindset.
Yeah, we're understanding the concept.
Back to this sort of ability and interest to apply yourself.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, or there is a huge need to learn. So the learning need is very high, but for an individual who might be overwhelmed of hearing, oh, shit, I need to learn all the time. How do we integrate learning in our lives? Like, what's some tactics to actually get it into the flow of our lives?
Yeah, I think differentiating the critical need to learn versus nice to learn.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's critical for all of us. Since we're overwhelmed with information, we need to be able to determine the different from what's going to be useful today instead of selecting all of it. We need to prioritize, and that means deselecting.
And do you have to sort of understand or try to understand where the future might be heading? So you're trying to
of course
forecast as well in that?
Yeah, I think, of course, that's a good idea. Yeah. But no one knows what's around the corner at the end of the day. Of course, we can make predictions around these being the top jobs needed for 2030. But at the end of the day, what if something happens 2027? We don't know what's going to be that effect. Like the pandemic, for instance. No one foresaw that.
I know a lot of companies now, when, again, innovation happens so quickly, it is impossible to foresee the future. What you have to do is you have to prepare and map a number of scenarios, and so that you're like half prepared. And when you realize what's actually happening, this pandemic is actually a reality now, then you act on that scenario. So it's more, about preparing than actually knowing the future.
So contingency plan, sort of.
Yeah, and it really increases your resilience once it happens.
Yeah. And I think that's Aline, sorry for interrupting, but it comes back to the reskilling of organizations. That organizations who have tried reskilling once, they're much more likely to be able to reskill again. So now that a lot of companies have done it during the pandemic, it's going to be easier the next time they have to reskill for something.
And I think also, to add to what you were saying, Sophie, that of course, kind of being able to see what's important to learn, but also follow what you like to learn. So more kind of lust driven, I see in general, like we were talking about the future of work, I think it's going to be more lust driven. And I think it's important to kind of learn things that you want to learn. So yeah, and I was thinking about coming here, like, how do I learn? And I think that it's like what you were saying, you listen to things, you just take it in. And I realized that I've been redefining my own learning in the past few years, because before maybe I had kind of higher expectations on myself, like, okay, if I'm learning, I need to write it down, and I need to take a test, and I need to make sure that, and now it's more like, oh, I heard that the other week, so I learned it. Now I know, and it's more of a curiosity, I guess, kind of having always this, when you pick up on something that sounds interesting to listen.
Yeah, but also when I think about sort of me studying for like until I was 28, the amount of books and just knowledge and learning that I had to do, I learned so much that I never actually will use. And that's an important part of, for example, platforms like Sana Labs too, the personalized learning, that it becomes more fun when you use platforms and technology to understand, number one, what, your way of learning, so that it becomes more natural, but also what you actually have to learn, like what gaps you have, which makes it much more efficient. So that's another way of making it more sort of graspable and less stressful, I'd say.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So not learning just for the learning's sake, but having output for it to be able to create, produce, and create opportunities rather.
Yeah.
And you mentioned we've been talking about organizations here.
Yeah.
What do we say to organizations who think learning is just a nice to have? That's it.
Learning. So obviously, I meet a lot of companies that work with learning, and many of the companies that I meet, they need to put learning at the strategic agenda. HR and learning, they need to get a seat at the table, and this needs to be prioritized. The budget needs to be there for learning. The budget shouldn't be there tomorrow. It should be there today. Otherwise, they're just postponing that challenge.
Yes.
So I think just like any other CXO, so should CLO, learning, chief learning officer, or chief HR officer. They should definitely have a seat at that table.
Yeah, we're already seeing the big tech companies developing their own universities. Of course, smaller companies probably can't do that, but it's also an important part of an increasingly important part of employee branding. Employers or employees look for companies that really take this. That really, finds learning important and acknowledges that. And so that's the kind of workplaces that people want to work at.
Do you see that, Lotta, in working with recruiting as well? Yeah,
definitely. The focus on where can I develop, like where can I learn and move on, and kind of, I think that has been a shift. I think that people before maybe when they were thinking about changing jobs, it was more like, okay, I'll do the same, but somewhere else. I'll try a new exciting spot for doing this. But now people really think about, okay, what's the next step in my development? What's the next step in my learning? And I think that's very exciting. And we do see a lot of organizations that are not quite there yet. And we as recruiters also have to try to guide them, but we also have to be able to identify that, okay, you are not going to like it here because they're not there.
More traditional.
Exactly.
But just to add, it's about building the skills for being a global citizen, not building the skills for this particular company, but rather, okay, how can we build you at this company as a part of your very lifelong learning journey?
Exactly.
Brilliant. And finally, going back to the individual. So what would you give as advice? How can one showcase one's ability and interest in learning before using Aline, let's say?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Use Aline. What I do, I'm a social media junkie, but I'm using social media in a way that I haven't really seen that many people do, which surprises me.
I really love how you use it.
Well, I'm using social media as Aline before Aline existed. So I share podcasts that I've been listening to with short insights, and talk about everything that I learned. I watched this TV show, this documentary, and for me, it's so rewarding to share it, but also get feedback from people and tips back from them. It's for me, it's so natural to learn together. That I guess that's another way of making it more fun, to do it in a community instead of on your own.
Definitely. I think that's such a big part of it. One of the things that I think about that I've learned is I think being vulnerable in the sense that not being a know-it-all. Because if you know it all, then you can't learn. So showing that, no, I actually don't know anything about this, but I'm super curious to learn.
Yes.
Please tell me. I think that's a big change of mindset. Probably.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, because like if I have someone applying for a job saying, yes, I know everything, I can do all of that, then I get a bit like suspicious.
Yeah.
And I want to hear like, okay, but what do you want to learn? And sometimes you encounter people, and I think that's learning. That's something that you have to unlearn, that you are not supposed to know everything.
Yeah.
And I think that that's super important, that curiosity again, to bring that into, for example, when you're looking for a job, that you ask questions, that you're open and honest with these are the things that I don't know as much about, like you were saying, like this is what I want to learn. And I think that the personal branding part is so important today. So doing, like, nobody would ever think, oh, Paulina, she's not very open to learning, because you can see that.
Exactly.
That's something that you realize that, okay, Paulina knows so much, but she's also all the time learning and taking in new things, which is, if you can show that in everything that you do, then there's no doubt.
Exactly. and we have been speaking in this conversation about sort of a shift. And there's an old school where we promoted, actually, like you were speaking about, more crystallized intelligence. So you're promoted based off the knowledge you had. Now it seems like we are finally more interested in a fluid intelligence. So what are you able to learn and adapt and unlearn? And in this future, applying yourself with passion and interest is how you can increase the amount of learning, and also with that amount of output. Would you say?
Definitely.
Thank you very much for the great insights, Lotta, Paulina, and Sophie. Now we will move over to a keynote that will be done remotely, and we have Carven Rasol joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Innocent. What you guys are doing at Aline is really interesting, because things are moving fast and it's pretty hard to follow up with all the changes happening out there. I mean, think about all the innovations happening in climate science, in the life science, trying to solve big problems. We're also moving towards a new era of Web3 with the promise of decentralization and inclusiveness and alternative payments. And it's clear that the world needs these solutions now more than ever, which is good and extremely exciting for talents interested in joining the creator economy to monetize their passion in a whole new way. So suppose you want to be part of building this future, you need to acquire new skills and learn fast, and combine all the new skills with previous experiences to be unique in the talent market. I believe it's crucial to make learning a lifestyle, especially if you want to stay highly relevant in whatever industry you're trying to enter or spend your time. Because the percentage of tasks and jobs done by AI is increasing rapidly. And for example, knowledge for an engineer is getting more advanced and sophisticated. So it will be more cognitive and creativity required to successfully manage the day-to-day work. So it's smart to be a step ahead of all this. A great way to approach this coming challenge is to find teams that truly share your values and companies that provide you a sense of purpose, because it will help you to keep the energy going and deal with some challenges like mental health that can be experienced with lifelong learning, because you will need to reinvent yourself repeatedly, and it can be psychologically challenging. And with regard to impact and purpose, the companies are booming in the Nordics, and many of them are looking for great people to help them solve very exciting challenges. And according to a new study, the impact startups make up 24% of all the job openings in the Nordics. So, and you can find some of the coolest teams and companies on jamvalues.com. It's also worth a reminder that we spent a huge amount of lives working. Most of us spend approximately 80,000 hours during a lifetime. So why not spending all this time and energy on something meaningful? It's also much more fun and easier to learn new things and innovate when we do things that matter together with like-minded people. One exciting thing any talent should be aware of is creating a growth mindset, which is a belief that your talent can be improved through hard work and good strategies, and the benefits are really limitless. Some companies provide learning and development opportunities to help you create a growth mindset, which is really excellent and good for everyone, but you can also create by yourself. One of the ways is to take on challenges and don't be afraid of mistakes, and embrace them and view them as learnings and experiences that you wouldn't get otherwise. I also want to mention the famous expression psychological safety at work, which is also relevant to what we're talking about, where the companies provide an environment where one will not be punished for speaking up with weird ideas, taking risks, and asking weird questions. In other words, a really safe environment to experiment, iterate, and fail. This will help you to create a growth mindset faster. We can compare what fuels people to perform at their best with how Elon Musk is sending rockets to space. He focuses on two main things. The first one is friction. He wants to have as little friction as possible, so the rocket is as aerodynamic as possible. And the second thing is to load as much fuel as possible, so that he gives as much energy as possible to the rocket going to orbit. And you should do the same thing when acquiring new skills and experiences. You should reduce all the friction and get as much motivation as possible to break new grounds and stay on top of your field. And this is actually what we have done on gemvalues.com. So before applying for any job, ask yourself the following questions. Will I contribute meaningfully to this team? And how are the values practiced in their day-to-day work? Do I have a role to play in their organization's story? And with these questions in mind, you will really be hard to compete with. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back. In this panel, we want to explore the topic of empowerment. And we've brought with us two brilliant guests, I would say, Malcolm and Leila, to explore this topic. I think let's start off with understanding who you are and what you do and how you sort of relate to this topic. We can start here, Leila.
Thank you for inviting me. I've been working in employment services for many years, and I also have a podcast called Jobb för alla, which is around the topic of how to create work for more people.
Oh yes, direct translation, work for everyone.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm very, I'm a nerd when it comes to personal development. I've always been centered around the topic of why do we do the things that we do. I've always been interested to know that, and especially when it comes to myself, in seeing how I grew up as an immigrant child to immigrant parents in a Swedish context. I want to know why are people like the way that they are, and how can I find a sense of self in this context. So it's always been a personal interest of mine.
I'm very interested in hearing some of that in this conversation as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
How about you, Malcolm?
Yeah, well, I'm a personal development nerd as well. Hence the name of my company, Brave Personal Development.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm a founder of Brave Personal Development, a company I started to coach and empower people. I'm also leadership and culture consultant at Hammer & Hanbury, prestigious consultancy that's helped creating the future of work. And I've spent the last 25 years understanding how to empower people through language, and how we can also really empower people by helping them understand what they're actually good at. Because I think that, quite often, and I'm jumping into the topic now, is that, quite often people say, well, I'm an accountant, but that doesn't tell you actually what they're good at. Or I'm a IT developer, but what are you actually good at? And so for me, empowerment, one of the first places empowerment starts is with language. And I really am extremely passionate about language, NLP master practitioner. And for 25 years, I've studied how can we use language to empower people and direct attention. So it's really a passion of mine.
I'm thinking, let's start off this conversation with clearing out some misconceptions around empowerment.
Great.
So what would you say are some misconceptions around empowerment?
Yeah, so I think, when it comes to common misconceptions, one of the things that I see working with organizations, because as a leadership and culture consultant, I'm inside companies large and small all the time. And they keep calling me to get their people engaged. Can you engage our people? And one of the things I reply back is, could we empower them instead? Because it's actually empowerment that creates engagement. It's like, do I know what I'm supposed to do? Am I empowered to do it? And do I have the sort of space around me to do the job in the way that I would be able to do it best? And so for me, one of the misconceptions around empowerment is actually that thing of engagement versus empowerment, because I think companies are mixing this up all the time. Because they're asking me, could you give us the icing? And it's like, what about the cake?
Sprinkle in some engagement.
Yeah. Like, what about the cake? But I think as well, we need to really think about this topic. We can think about this topic on many levels. So one of the things that I think about is, inside companies, do people know their place, like in the structure, and feel like they understand it enough that they can take action? But I think as well, and this is something I think will cross over into the area that you speak about, is around identity. That people have a strong sense of self-identity and are able to know it for themselves, but also convey it to other people, because that creates belonging, that creates space. And so for me, like that is one of the really critical things, that you can give someone empowerment. I think you can create structures for that to happen, but the individual also has to bring a lot to the table.
Bring themselves.
And I feel like right now we're going through a phase of company cultures where it's like, you do it for me. Like, I want you to show me. And I feel like there's a generation of people coming into work where they want the workplace to prove that it's a two-way street. You have to meet in the middle. The individual must bring a strong sense of self-worth and empowerment to the table, so the company can know what to do with it in the best possible way.
That's brilliant. And does it bring seeing organizations more like a collection of individuals as well, not an entity in itself only, but a collection of these identities and how we bring it to work and collaborate?
Well, I think it's going to become more and more important, because what happened during the pandemic is we kind of disintegrated the workplace as a concept, right? Going to work now is anything. It's staying home, it's going to a cafe, it's working from AMP's activity. And one of the things that I see is absolutely critical right now as we move from remote working to hybrid working is people are going to be less tethered to the organization in terms of actually physically being in it, which means they need to have a very strong self-identity and self-worth and be empowered so that they can operate in lots of dynamic environments that are probably fast changing. Yeah. And they're not going to be given, like that whole thing of working your way up a company ladder to get the corner office and the pot plant. That's gone, baby. That's disappeared. Now it's going to be a whole different journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always thought about, reflected on this subject when it comes to empowerment, because I myself have been forced to find my place in the context of the world that I'm living in, or the society I'm living in. So I know, I recognize all the things that you described. So what I see in people who are unemployed, for example, who are trying to enter the job market, is the lack of self-awareness, that they don't know who they are and they don't know what to provide to the table. If I compare, for example, in the 60s when my parents came to Sweden, it was just you go into a place and say, I like to work, and they give you a broom or a napkin or something, and you start to work. That's it. But here you have to talk about what is your value to us? Why would we hire you instead of all the hundreds of other people who want to work with us? And that is the problem that they have. They don't know what they bring to the table. They don't know their sense of value or self-awareness, what is unique with me, so to speak. So, and that is what you need to start to work with. You need to start to create this self-awareness. Who am I? What do I bring to the table? And what do I want from this workplace?
Because you haven't had the understanding or been taught that it's important actually who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
And this, I am visualizing sort of a shift from you as a tool, maybe more industrial age related, to you as an individual contributing in an information age with your perspective and bringing that to work.
Yeah, and I think mostly Aline and the work that you do, the companies that you meet, then the people that you hire, they have to have a sense of self. But in the line of work that I work, in employment services, then it's more the more simple work. You work as a truck driver, or you work as with cleaning or something more simple, and they have a trouble understanding why I have to market myself. Who I am. I just want to do the job. That's all. But even then, you have hundreds of people applying for the same job. You need to market yourself. What makes you unique?
I see a great opportunity for us here to explore this starting from an individual perspective. So how can I practically increase my sense of empowerment, and then going into organizations as well and finding an alignment there. So starting from the individual perspective, what is sort of key advice that both of you share in your work?
Well, I always start with yourself. Who are you? If I meet someone who's unemployed, I always start by asking I need to know who you are.
Sort of your history.
Yeah, the history and what makes you tick. What do you like? What do you enjoy? What makes you lose sense of time, for example? Start there. Even if it's far distant from the line of work that you're applying for, you still need to find something that makes you engaged and focus on that.
Sort of, what do you tend to do when no one's watching or when you're not forced to do anything? And find keys from there.
Yeah, I have the opportunity working as a coach to work with a lot of people who are transitioning in their career. And, I think that, one of the things that we talk about unemployment, but there's also this bridge people have to cross now, often in different parts of their life where they need to move from one career to another. So, you might be in a career that's getting disrupted by technology. You've got to move somewhere else. And how can you bring the skills and talents that you had in one area across that bridge into another? And so one of the things I do as a coach, you know, and I help people to really get in touch with the things they're good at. So you might be an amazing team builder, you might be really analytical, I might be really good motivator. But what happens is if you can bring a specific set of talents and skills to any role, you become more attractive. So for instance, if I'm going for a job interview with you and it's a job that is going to be a product developer, so the job is product development, but let me tell you how I'm going to do it, because these are my skills and talents. So when I come into your organization, and then I can have a whole pitch to you, and I have a structure to teach people to do this, I can actually compellingly tell you how I'm going to do that role. And as soon as you do that, you move your opportunity potential so far up the ladder. Because most people who come in, one of the questions that get asked all the time at job interviews is, tell me about yourself, right? And I go to schools like Hyper Island and I say, tell me about yourself. And everyone goes, right? They freak out. It's like the worst question in the world. But if you can say, well, actually, I'm an analytical motivator. So what do I mean by that? And then you can have a little pitch. How much more confident will you be? But almost how much more value are you offering an organization or a potential employer? And what's really interesting, and I love to do this, is helping someone, you know, who has come to Sweden to really show their value to an organization because of where they came from. So and this makes me so happy. So, you know, I'll say, coach someone from Syria, for example. It's like, well, I survived the war, or, you know, I was a refugee, and now I'm established in a job, and I want to better that as a way to make you even more attractive to the marketplace.
I love this. So it's like you already have it instead of searching from outside. What can I do to become better? What am I actually good at? Understanding that in the first case. And then as well, I love the part of translating that or transferring that into a new field. Because I'm guessing many times when you go into an interview, you're just thinking about how can I pitch and how can I get this job? But starting from the other end, who am I and what do I have? And how is this relevant?
And what's your superpower? Because usually it's not your degree, right? You might be a doctor, but your superpower might be empathy. You know,
hundreds
so
might have that degree. What makes you?
But what is it about you that makes you really be able to function at a high level in your job? And I believe that everybody can do two or three things really, really well, and that's how they do every job. So if I look at your work history and we go through, we'll probably see the same patterns of behavior that made you successful in each one. Just keep repeating. So the more you can know that, the better.
But also to move away from this, for example, in Sweden, when you go to networking events and you start by asking, okay, what do you do? And you say, I am an attorney, or I am a coder, for example. Instead of saying that, you say, I enjoy helping people to thrive in their business, for example. That is what you do. You are not a coder, and I mean, that's not what you were born to do.
Absolutely.
What you want to do is to help people thrive, for example.
And how empowering is that narrative, right? Because then we're connecting skills to identity, to outcomes. And this is like, you know, the cycle, what I call the cycle of self-empowerment, is that, and I had just such a lovely message on LinkedIn on Monday. You know, a lady said to me, you taught me like a year ago how to pitch yourself in a job interview. And I went for a job interview the other day and I landed my dream job using this technique, you know. But for me, this is the cycle of self-empowerment, because once you can put into language what your skills, talents, wisdom, and knowledge is in a really concise way, in a way that feels comfortable to you, and you practice it and get used to giving it away, you become a magnet for opportunity.
Yeah, you can even see it on LinkedIn now. More and more people, they don't have their job title in the title section. They have what they actually do.
Chief Wisdom Officer, or unicorn wrangler.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, making the world better through sustainability.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then going to the organizational perspective, we have touched upon it. This was very concrete, by the way, tangible advice for an individual. And then for an organization, how can we increase the, let's say, opportunities for an individual to feel more empowered? How do we design organizations better?
Yes. From my experience is that you need to, managers, for example, they need to have more, in Swedish we call it tillitsbaserat ledarskap, which means trust leadership, basically, that you trust that the people that you are in charge of, that they can do the job, and that you trust them, and you coach them more than you manage them.
Yes.
Basically, because then you feel more empowered, and you feel a sense of, okay, my manager believes in me, so and trusts me to do a good job.
I like that. In the startup world, there is the term that doing what you're told is a fireable offense.
Right.
So you're meant to challenge and create and actually have the trust to do things differently than what you're told.
Yeah. And what's great about what you just said is the new way of working post-pandemic. Like, there's no leader cannot be that kind of leader anymore, because their team is no longer going to be in front of them all the time. For, in terms of knowledge workers, they're going to be distributed, in a hybrid way. And I think it's just going to be this ongoing effect of people moving out of the mothership and only using the mothership, as my friend Kristen calls it, just to come in and collaborate, meet, socialize, get connection, have that feedback time, the coaching that you mentioned earlier. But the actual work can happen anywhere. And so we're going to develop this, very trust-based leaders. It's not going to be about that anymore.
But it's also a fine line there, because some leaders, they take it too far, and that they release all control whatsoever from their teams. And you still need to have be in touch with the people that you are in, and ask them how's it going, if there's anything I can do for you. So you keep this contact with them. Otherwise, you lose touch, and they feel a sense of nobody cares what I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The way I have differentiated that is leading with context rather than control. Because it's also a very weak sense of control. Okay, I know that you checked in at this time, you were physically in the building, and you left at the right time. But by leading with cases together, and what can you bring to this? And actually having the individuals trying to understand the context deeper. And we're more of a partnership. So rather than this is an entity, this is what we're doing, we're a group of individuals with unique perspectives, and how can we, in this context of what we're trying to create, perform our best. And so looking at an individual, let's say, who's outside of a job right now, what are some triggers to look for when looking for a job, to try to identify if an organization is empowering or not?
Well, me personally, I always look at I do research, for example, look at what kind of message or communication style or strategy they have on their website, on their LinkedIn profile, or what kind of people are working there. For example, me, if I'm looking for a company that I would like to work with, I look at what kind of people are working there, to see if are there people that I can see myself work with or not. What do they communicate out on their webpage and LinkedIn profiles and so on, to see if it's something that I can connect with personality-wise, and see if that's something I can contribute to.
So
also
taking the pulse of the company.
That's what I do.
I can only speak from experience on this one, because the first thing is I always tell people who come to me for help with, to get coaching from me to help get into the workforce, or is disrupt the process of job applications. Like, sending in job applications is, basically putting yourself into a pool of hundreds of candidates. But can you do one or two different things, empowering things, that would actually make you stand outside the pack? So So, one of the things I encourage people to do is to reach out to companies with a handwritten card saying, I'd love to invite you for a fika and learn more about your organization to see if we'd be a good fit for each other. I remember when I first moved to Sweden, I only knew my wife and her parents. I knew 3 people. I didn't know anybody, zero network. And, my whole approach there was just, I realized after, 20 job applications and zero response of any kind that this is a waste of time. So how can I go around the system, contact people, pick up the phone or send them a handwritten card, follow that up with a phone, and actually kind of differentiate yourself in the marketplace, but also kind of take that position, the empowered position of, I want to check you out to see if I think you're good enough to apply for. And so then the power dynamic of the whole job search just changes, right? And I remember when I came here, I'll just share a personal story, was, I had a job, got a first job in Sweden, and I wanted to take a step up after, 6 to 8 months, I can't remember. And I called up this sales manager and said, I'm really interested in your organization and the job you've got advertised. Are you available for a lunch? Could I take you for a lunch to learn more about your organization, how I might fit into it? And he said, yeah, that's fine. Took this guy out to lunch, had a fantastic lunch. And at the end of it, I pulled out a CV and said, based on our conversation, would you be willing to put this on the HR manager's desk and recommend me for an interview? And he said 100%. 2 days later, had an interview. 2 days after that, had a second interview and got the job. So I think there's a proactivity there where you can empower yourself to not be kind of just playing a lottery with algorithms of, CVs but actually putting yourself out there and letting people see, because if you look at a CV, how much could you tell about me from a CV? I mean, you know me, I'm loud and weird and do 100 things, but how could I put that on a CV? How would my energy or talents or wisdom and experience possibly fit on a piece of A4 paper?
I have another tip in line with that tip, contacting someone for a fika or lunch. That is also, for example, if you want to transition from one industry to another and you don't know so much about the industry, you can contact someone on LinkedIn and ask them for what we call a backwards interview, which means that you want to get to know the industry through someone. You don't contact them necessarily to have a job opportunity. You just want to learn about the industry. And that way you can empower yourself more to know about the industry that you want to enter, so that when you do applications to different companies, you already know what you're talking about and you know what they're looking for. And from this person, you can also get maybe recommendations. This and this kind of company would be interested in someone like you.
And that would be a much more informed application as well.
Yeah, exactly.
With having the knowledge about the field.
Yeah.
Can we just jump for a second to job interviews?
Yes.
Would that be all right?
Yeah, sure, yes.
It's your show, but
go ahead.
But one thing that I just tell another quick story is that my wife entered the workforce, a few years ago after basically having a whole career as an opera singer. And then she went to university, got a degree, and then she had to have the first job interviews of her life, basically, because she used to do auditions. And she said, I don't know how to do a job interview. And I said, well, let's just Google the top 50 questions asked at job interviews. And there, there's lists of them online. And I said, let's just write a compelling answer for each one of these. And then when she went to a job interview, she went to her first job interview, came and said, every question they asked was on the list. Right? Because most of the people interviewing are probably getting the questions off Google.
It's the process, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And it's a ritual, right?
Yes.
A job interview is a ritual. So you can predict it. It's not going to be, I don't know, unicorn writing or something strange happening. It's like, where are you from? What's your experience? What would you contribute to the company? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Are you a team player? They ask all these questions, right? So you can actually go through and prepare for all of the questions that you expect them to ask.
Can I ask a question there? In her preparation, I'm leading towards an answer, but is she preparing to say what they want to hear, or is she genuinely preparing what is her answer to these questions?
I think we did a little bit of marketing there. I helped her with that. But I think that the main point was that you can be very empowered when you go into a job interview. if you know what your skills and talents are, if you've practiced all the questions, if someone asks you, what kind of person are you? And you say it, at the end of saying it, ask the person that's interviewing you, what kind of person are you?
Oh, yeah.
Put the question back across the table. Yeah.
And the reason I asked my question was because I feel like many times when people go into interviews, they're so focused on saying the right thing or saying what the person wants to hear, but rather go in, be empowered, tell them, speak your truth, so to say, share who you are. And if there's a match, there's a match. If there isn't, it's not. It's not.
And if I recall correctly, my wife did like 4 job interviews and got 4 offers.
Yeah.
And then, this is empowered, she went to the clinic she really wanted, because she's a hearing specialist, she went to the clinic she really wanted a job at and said, I've got 4 offers, but I'd rather work for you. And they created a job for her.
Yeah, because you don't want to seem desperate in your job application phase. You need to diverse yourself as much as you can and not get too attached to one specific job, and make sure that you are in a position of empowerment in that situation.
And find the leverage in just being you, sort of.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation, very inspirational, both with the stories you shared and very insightful, sharing your knowledge as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next, we will be moving into another panel where I will actually be a participant in that panel. Stay tuned.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. You might be slightly confused now because just a while ago, I was in that couch in the panel and Innocent was here as a moderator, and now we switched places.
Tables have turned.
Yes, tables have turned. But as you will notice, considering the topic, I might as well be sitting in the panel as well. So this will be more of a sort of conversation between friends and I was about to say foes, but that's not really true. The topic of this panel is freelancer or FTE, full-time employee. So we're going to talk about sort of building your career outside of the corporate structure and what that means. And as I said, I have a personal take on this. I hear often that people view me as somebody who's brave because I left a full-time job when my kids were 1 and 3, I think, to build my own company. I never really viewed myself as being brave. I was more leaving a context that didn't make me happy, where I wanted to be a manager, but nobody listened to me. And I was like, I want to be happy. I want to work in a space with a boss who believes in me. And that's when I founded my own company, and that's 7 years ago. And, probably the best decision in my life, I'd say. So let's start with a personal take. In this panel, we have Tima Fofana, marketing whiz, working with e-commerce, website designer. I mean, you do a little bit of everything.
Yes.
And you've been working with Aline, of course, helping them out with their marketing efforts, among other things.
Yes.
We have Innocent Mogenga, one of the founders of Aline. You've also been a colleague of mine at a conference called Gather.
Exactly.
Yes. And we have Isabel Delaskiewicz.
Wow.
Well,
Good job.
brand designer. And so I would love to hear your take on this. I already told you sort of my take on this, but Isabel, let's start with you. Would you say that you have a moment where you actually felt that you did something not as traditional, where you took a leap that people were like admiring of sorts, or where you felt brave?
I would say, entrepreneurship journey is all about brave leap and a step of faith. But one of those was, I would say, a few years ago when I was like doing freelance gig during the evening and working a full-time job during the day. I took 3-week trips to Australia to go to a creative conference, and just before COVID. And I went there and I just were amazed by this 10,000 creative people all over the place. And I've just decided, okay, I will not wait to have like enough gigs to have 100% of my salary paid. I've decided to go back to France and give my resignation letter and quit my job and start full-time freelancing without knowing what will come next. And I've done that. Every people in my family went crazy. And the next day I received like a call from nowhere asking me, do you want to freelance 100% of your time and how much you would have? I'm not like saying that that amount.
That doesn't happen every time.
Please do.
No, I would not say like quit your job, do this, and you will receive the call. But I would say like if I had waited, maybe I would have like not having this bravery in my veins today. I think having this step of faith before having the call changed everything in the way I'm working today.
And the timing of this, you went to the conference right before the pandemic.
Yes.
So does that mean that you built your business during the pandemic?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Like the 100% time.
Yeah.
I've been like part-time freelancing for 3 years before that. But the full-time freelancing I started January 2020. Pandemic started 11th of March 2020. And I've been really having I've been lucky. Also working in digital during the pandemic helps a lot because everything went digital. So
So I would say my work is pretty much like really thriving during pandemic.
The reason why I asked this is because I would say that the pandemic is the first time in these 7 years as a freelancer that I felt super vulnerable and scared. I know now that it only lasted for a couple of months because then the digital part of building conferences and facilitating just started to blossom, and it turned out to be an even better economy for me, at least, than the physical in-person one. But yeah, super interesting. So Innocent, what about your endeavors?
So I come to think about sort of my transition from, so the majority of my adult career has been very entrepreneurially based, but I used to run a chain of fashion stores. And then during that period, I also worked with communications and marketing. So I handled all our communications, set up our e-commerce. And I remember after that journey, I decided that I know communication. I've worked with it for 4 years now. I want to continue working with this, but not having the conventional educational stamp on my CV maybe. Also maybe the fact of, as we spoke about previously, when you apply to jobs and who gets the benefit of a doubt, and having a name like Innocent Mugenga, I really didn't find any opportunities. I didn't get any job as a communicator. So at the time, I didn't see it as a big step. What I did was, with maybe an entrepreneurial spirit, I decided to start a company. If no one wants to employ me, I'll employ myself, similar to what you're saying. And actually took on my first clients within fashion, worked with big brands, big Swedish brands like Peak Performance and G-Star Raw, and had to prove myself maybe in that way. And that was my way into freelancing as a communicator.
So, I mean, obviously, as a white person, it's somewhat easier for me, but I can still see, the red thread there, that freelancing can also be a way of taking a career that nobody else hands to you, and ownership. An ownership of your own career when people don't believe in you for different reasons, be it your background, ethnical background, or your gender, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So it might be like, okay, so my CV doesn't impress you. What about my portfolio? So you create a portfolio of clients and actual work.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I would say exactly the thing. Like the difference between full-time employee and freelancing, or having your own company, is like people look at you in terms of achievements more than in terms of resume. And they will ask what you can do, and they will give you a shot really much more easily than a resume. Because there is a lockdown key. There is kind of like a feeling of when there is like a full time.
So in a way, we're living the future that we spoke about in the future of sort of learning panel.
Totally.
Yes. Yeah. So let's hear Tima's take on this.
Yeah, it's literally gonna sound like I'm echoing Innocent in many ways. So I have my academic background was in journalism, and my career background was mainly in sales for years. And I discovered very early on that I wanted to work with marketing. Like, I love marketing, and I'd freelance for friends, or I'd do like a project here and there. And very similar to Innocent's experience, like once I decided that, okay, I'm actually going to go for marketing, I want to work in communications, I applied for jobs, like I wouldn't get a call back, no one would contact me. And I'd actually reach out to recruiters and be like, hey, just out of curiosity, how come no one contacted me, just for feedback so I know for future reference. And they would write things like, oh, we're actually looking for someone who has a little bit of knowledge in LinkedIn marketing, for instance. And I'm like, I used to work at LinkedIn. Like, I literally worked there. So I have quite a lot of experience. So I started to connect the dots that, okay, it's my name and my ethnicity. So I basically just felt like I don't want to live like this anymore. So founded my own company and started freelancing from there.
Wow.
Yeah, strong stories. It's sort of... both discouraging and so great to hear that it's still possible to find that route sort of around.
There is hope.
There is hope.
Everyone.
Yeah. And we really want that to be the sort of the main message of this panel.
Sure. Yeah.
So what would you say, we want to encourage everyone who's listening to take a leap? I mean, having a full-time job is perfectly fine, but if you want to do it. You want to start your own business. You want to choose another lifestyle.
I think there's a level before thinking of it as starting a business when you could think about it as gig. So gig work. So let me try to gig maybe on my free time. And then sort of if that builds, you can build on that and then create the full business out of it. But it's becoming more and more easy out without too much commitment. But of course.
But how do you do that? Because I just quit my job.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if I was brave or stupid. Probably a little bit of both. But if you don't want to do that, if you want to start small, you could have a full-time job and be a freelancer at the same time, I guess. But what options are there?
For me, it was like literally working at a creative studio as a project manager for really luxury, good, big brands. And I was like just falling in love with the DA team, all the creative team. And I was like, I will never know how to use Photoshops and everything. And I just started hanging out with people and what are you doing on the lunch break, like just looking at them because it seems like they don't need to eat. They were always working and everything, and just be attracted by the passion there and starting asking a lot of questions. Then looking for mentorship. Can you have time to help me? Can I help you with anything? And try to be just open to accept any where I can help. So start to volunteer and then help in organization, association for free, obviously, but where I can just learn aside and alongside amazing people. And when it's changed, it's the day someone started to ask me how much you would ask to do that. And I was like, what? Can I actually be paid for that? That's where my mind shift. And I was like, okay, now I can start to think as a freelancer. Maybe my work worth something.
I really like that because you're really driven by your curiosity there. So you're letting your curiosity guide you and just where can I apply? Where can I learn?
Yeah.
I like that approach.
Yeah, same. Amazing.
What about your transitions? Like, did you do a stupid brave jump like me, or?
Yeah, I did it more like you. And I'm thinking you said 7 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I think mine is maybe closer to 5. I don't remember. I don't have the best time perspective. But today there's so many more platforms where you could take a gig, get paid through the platform. So it's much more easy for you as an individual to transact with a company. So I feel like there's more.
Yeah, you don't even need a company, like an official own. Yeah,
exactly. That's actually how I started. I put up a profile on Upwork just to basically freelance. So that's how it kind of started. But then it got to a stage where in my day job, my sales job, like it wasn't going well. And I had to look deeper within myself, like, okay, why isn't it going well? Because I know I'm good at sales. I know what I'm doing. And I realized that I actually am so unhappy. I used to be the person that didn't mind Mondays, but all of a sudden I started dreading Mondays. So I came to a point where I realized I have to love what I do and I have to feel excited about working and excited about Mondays. So yeah, I quit when I didn't really have any clients. I freelanced a little bit, but one of the things that I did, and even with Aline, was I was looking for companies that needed like interns, really. So any type of marketing intern. And I just reached out to them like, hey, I'm just starting my own company. I want experience. You need help. Like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, kind of. So that's really how I got into it step by step.
And I would add, like, if you want to help, if you want to learn, if you want to change career or do something aside, you have to also be really specific. When you come to someone and you say, I want to learn from you, I want to help, you need to first dig deeper into yourself and say, what do you want to learn exactly? Because like I see a lot of people, including me, Innocent and Tima, we are eager to help someone else achieving what they want, especially if I can make you learn something you need to learn. But I need to know what do you need? How can I help you? Yeah, exactly. So if someone come and say anything, I'm kind of a bit lost. But if someone came and say, I need to learn this specifically, and I see that in you, then I'm like, of course, whatever, I want to help you.
That's so true. It makes it so easier. I could have some people getting in touch with me with, and when they're specific with, I'm studying UX and I'm interested in, getting in the field and understanding how to develop a product from scratch. Perfect. Let's have a conversation about that. And
Rather than just, I'm interested in Alina's company. I want to hang out with you.
Yeah. I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But
Yes, time
To the
is
next
scarce.
first 10 person.
exactly.
An important part of this is, of course, building your own sort of personal brand. You already mentioned that you worked on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Did that help you in actually using LinkedIn to leverage your career and in visibility as a consultant in any way? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it helped in the way that I was familiar with the platform to start off with and knew kind of how to find companies to reach out to, what groups to kind of join, and just the conversations to really involve myself in, so to speak. But I think I didn't leverage it as much in the beginning. It was more emails and calls. I was basically cold calling and emailing people on a regular.
What about you? Which channels have been important for referrals?
So for me, I think there is no recipe. Like there is no correct recipe. There is more about like authenticity. Like stay who you are. If you are not eager to personal brand yourself and put your face everywhere, I have a lot of people who brand the personal brands or their company, and they said, I don't want to put my face everywhere on my socials. I'm like, it's okay. If it's not fit for you, even if it's the trend today, don't do it, because at the end you will not attract the clients you are able to help. You know, so don't fake yourself, because people will see it on the long side. So for me, cold email calling didn't work because I'm a half introvert. So it's always been about like networking. Like a person who I worked with was like saying a lot of good thing about me, and then it came at a point where I was like, oh, I don't have time to help you, but so I'm still 2 years later full time at the point of I'm still haven't marketing the cold email and things like this, because I always have like the network, and I love working that. And it's also a reason why I came to live to Stockholm during pandemic, not to flee from my country, but because of I'm one-on-one person. I love to meet people. I love to be in a co-working place and talk to people, help, and more than marketing, even if I do everything digital for my clients.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm also that kind of social person who loves those interactions. And I guess I see that as social capital is always there, regardless if it's in the room or in a larger context. What social media platforms allows us to do is sort of scale that. So authenticity as the vantage point, and then whatever channel comes natural to you. We have spoken about this.
Yeah.
I have a very hard time with Twitter. You're a superstar. Twitter, but Twitter is not really my channel, so I stay off it. But LinkedIn.
Yeah, which
for
is a good
sharing.
thing.
Yeah,
you have to be sort of crazy to be on Twitter.
Okay, is that what I'm missing? Yeah, but no, it's staying true to sort of. It's just scaling yourself on these networks, basically.
But what I would add with social is like go where your client would be. If you do small businesses or individual entrepreneur, go to Instagram. But if you do big company, it doesn't matter. Go to LinkedIn. Use Facebook groups. Really market do some research and look where your ideal clients is hanging out. Don't spend too much time trying to be in 6 different socials. That doesn't matter, even especially if you're starting. If you're starting, you need to really be focusing on 1 or 2 channels. It might be really weird to say that in 2021 too. But that's really will save you a lot of effort.
One of my favorite examples is Innocent and the way we met. When you just contacted me and you said, I love Gather. I would love to do like a podcast series, interview some of your speakers. And I just loved it. And you did it so well, which eventually led me to invest in Aline, because I know, that you're a person who who takes initiatives and do great stuff. So that's another way of building your brand.
And yeah, I think there's something great there. So there, yes, I wanted to do something specific. I wanted to do the series, but out of curiosity. But I think a lot of networking is just, okay, you were in that context then, so I found you to be a very curious person. I didn't think maybe someday I'll get her to invest, or maybe like when we're when you're speaking to your clients, maybe someday this will be a client. Just giving,
exactly,
giving, and then ultimately,
exactly. Great example. So we have to wrap up, but I love wrapping up the panels I facilitate with just like a recommendation, like almost a one sentence. Recommendations to the people who are listening. So I guess when it comes to this topic, it would be something along the lines of like on Monday, if you want to start your way towards a gig life, what action should you take? One action. Yes.
This might not be as much of an action, but your mindset. For me, I had to develop a growth mindset. I had to not be afraid of failing and knowing that I'm actually going to learn from failing. So that's been probably the biggest impact on my freelancing life, so to speak. Just having that growth mindset and not being afraid to try things.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, what about you?
I would probably go for knowledge sharing. So communicate, share your knowledge and insights. Just give once again. And without, it doesn't have to be super intentional. It is good if you have a call to action and all of that, but ultimately just communicate, give insights and knowledge, and people will see you as knowledgeable. And when they need your service, they'll probably turn to you, hopefully.
Yeah, I love that. On top of that, I would maybe say like, don't wait for excellence or perfection to start. Don't wait to have like enough money or enough time, enough people, enough network. Just start and see, because everything you will need, you will find on the way.
Yes. Amazing.
I love that.
So much wisdom. Thank you.
Thank
you, Tima, Innocent, and Isabel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What was that?
I'm twinning. I love it. Thank you.
So that, my friends, were all the panels, the keynotes for today. And now I'm handing over to Innocent and Stephanie for the final words.
Wow, what an event, what an evening, and thank you for sharing it with us. Today we've explored relocating and creating opportunities for yourself. We've explored the principles of empowerment, the option of a full-time employment or freelance gig opportunities, as well as the learning age or information age. I'd like to sum it up with something that I hope can be of inspiration for you as well, by sharing research that a friend of mine, Susan Lindberg, did through her company, The Social Few. So they've coined this term called perspective density, which I believe is something that we as a society could be aiming to increase. So in her study, there's 3 different groups with different amounts of perspective density, meaning the amount of perspectives represented in this group. So everything from gender, background, and all different factors that can affect your perspective. So they gave these 3 groups the same question. And each group was tasked with coming up as many solutions to this problem as possible. And what they clearly saw is that the group with the highest amount of perspective density, meaning once again, amount of perspectives represented within that group, came up with an astonishing amount more perspectives, actually 10 times more than the group with least perspective density. And what does this tell us? This tells us that there is a tremendous value in the perspective, the unique perspective you as an individual can bring into a group. And in this information age, with these knowledge-based organizations, the way we stay on top and remain innovative is by bringing in and utilizing a diverse set of perspectives. So with that, I hope you can find some more confidence in your unique perspective as an individual.
Yes, so we just want to thank you for spending your evening with us, and we hope that you have learned a lot. Please reach out to us with what you've learned, what you liked, and what you want to see more.
I would also like you to reach out with some feedback on the Aline app. So try the app, use it for your learning journey, and get us some feedback. We want to develop this together with you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.